The rain was relentless, hammering the windshield of my beat-up Honda as I pulled into the gravel lot outside my brother's apartment in Portland, Oregon. I was 26, freshly dumped, and nursing a bruised ego after a fight with my boss that had me questioning my entire career as a graphic designer. I needed this weekend to disappear into Noah's couch, drown my sorrows in cheap beer, and forget the world existed. Noah's place was a third-floor walk-up in a quirky, artsy neighborhood, the kind where coffee shops doubled as art galleries and every other building had a mural of a whale or a bicycle. I hauled my duffel bag up the creaky stairs, the smell of damp wood and incense hitting me as I reached the door. Noah, my older brother by 3 years, greeted me with a bear hug and a grin that said he'd already started on the whiskey. "Eli, you look like you got chewed up and spit out," he teased, ruffling my dark curls. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help a small smile. Noah had that effect. He was a human sunbeam even when life was messy. His roommate, Caleb, was sprawled on the couch, a half-empty bottle of bourbon in one hand and a lopsided smirk on his face. Caleb was 25, blonde, with the kind of sharp jawline that belonged in a cologne ad, but his bloodshot eyes and disheveled flannel screamed, "I've been drinking since noon." I'd met him once before, at Noah's birthday last year, but we'd barely spoken. He'd been too busy flirting with half the bar to notice me. "Yo, Eli," he slurred, raising the bottle like a toast. "Welcome to the chaos." I muttered a greeting and dropped my bag by the door, already regretting my decision to crash here. Noah's apartment was a disaster. Pizza boxes stacked on the counter, mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of weed lingering in the air. But it was free and I was broke, so I'd make it work. Noah handed me a beer, and we settled into the evening, catching up over the hum of the city outside. Caleb, meanwhile, kept interrupting with random stories about his job as a bartender, each one more incoherent than the last. By 10 p.m., he was passed out, snoring loudly enough to drown out the TV. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Noah cursing in the kitchen. "Caleb's gonna be the death of me," he grumbled, scrubbing a pan caked with something unidentifiable. "He's a good guy, but he's a train wreck when he drinks." I nodded, sipping my coffee, trying not to stare at Caleb, who was now awake and slumped at the table, nursing a hangover. His blonde hair stuck out in every direction, and his green eyes were bleary but oddly vulnerable. For a moment, I caught myself wondering what he was like sober, then shook it off. I wasn't here to play therapist. That afternoon, Noah got called into his job at the community center, leaving me alone with Caleb. "You don't have to babysit me," Caleb said, catching my awkward glance as I scrolled through my phone. His voice was softer now, less cocky. "I'm not always like this, you know?" I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Could have fooled me." He laughed, a low, warm sound that caught me off guard. "Fair, but stick around. I might surprise you." And he did. Over the next few hours, Caleb sobered up and turned into someone else entirely. He was funny, sharp, and disarmingly honest, telling me about growing up in a small town in Idaho, where being openly bisexual meant dodging dirty looks and whispered slurs. "I moved here to be free," he said, staring out the window at the rain-soaked street. "But sometimes I feel like I'm still running." I didn't know what to say. My own life, growing up in Seattle, coming out as gay in college, hadn't been easy, but it wasn't like that. I found myself opening up about my ex, about the job I hated, about feeling like I was drifting. Caleb listened, really listened, and it felt like he saw me in a way no one had in a long time. By evening, we were sitting on the apartment's tiny balcony, sharing a pizza and watching the city lights flicker on. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and crisp. Caleb's knee brushed against mine, and neither of us moved away. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly, his eyes locked on mine. My heart did a stupid flip, and I told myself to chill. This was just a moment, nothing more. But then he leaned closer, and I forgot how to breathe. The moment hung between us, fragile and electric, like the city lights shimmering below. Caleb's breath was warm, tinged with the faint scent of peppermint gum, and his green eyes held a question I wasn't sure I could answer. I pulled back, heart pounding, and mumbled something about needing another slice of pizza. He didn't push, just gave me a small, knowing smile and leaned back against the balcony railing. The rest of the night passed in a blur of easy conversation and stolen glances. Caleb told me about his dream to open his own bar someday, a place where everyone could feel safe, no matter who they were. I told him about the graphic novel I'd been sketching in secret, too afraid to show anyone. "You gotta put that out there, Eli," he said, his voice earnest. "The world needs your art." I laughed it off, but his words stuck, burrowing into the part of me that still believed I could be something more. When Noah got home, he raised an eyebrow at us sprawled on the couch, now arguing over which 90s rom-com was the least cringeworthy. "You two are getting along," he said, smirking. I felt my face heat up, but Caleb just grinned and tossed a throw pillow at him. "Your brother's cool, man. Don't mess this up for me." Noah laughed, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that had my stomach in knots. Sunday morning brought a new kind of chaos. Caleb, fully sober now, insisted on making breakfast, pancakes that were somehow both burnt and undercooked. "I'm better at mixing drinks," he admitted, scraping a charred mess into the trash. I couldn't help but laugh, and soon we were trading stories about our worst cooking disasters. It felt so normal, so right, that I almost forgot why I'd come to Portland in the first place. But reality crashed back in when my phone buzzed with a text from my ex. "Jamie. Miss you. Can we talk?" My stomach twisted. Jamie had broken my heart 3 months ago, leaving me for someone less complicated. Whatever that meant. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to respond or hurl the phone off the balcony. Caleb noticed my shift in mood. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. I hesitated, then showed him the text. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he grabbed his jacket. "Come on. You need to get out of your head." He dragged me to a local art festival, a chaotic sprawl of booths and live music in a park near the river. The air smelled of fried dough and fresh paint, and Caleb seemed to know half the vendors by name. He introduced me to a painter named Marisol, a trans woman in her 30s with a warm laugh and a booth full of vibrant abstracts. "Caleb's a troublemaker, but he's got a good heart," she said, winking at me. I wondered how much she could see in my face, in the way I kept stealing glances at him. As we wandered, Caleb's hand brushed mine again, and this time I didn't pull away. We stopped at a booth selling handmade journals, and he bought one with a leather cover embossed with a crescent moon. "For your sketches," he said, handing it to me. My throat tightened. No one had ever done something like that for me. Not Jamie, not anyone. I mumbled a thank you, but inside, I was reeling. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just here for the weekend. That night, back at the apartment, Noah was out with friends, leaving Caleb and me alone again. We ended up on the rooftop, a shared blanket draped over our shoulders as the city hummed below. "You ever feel like you're waiting for permission to live your life?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my chest tight. "All the time." He turned to me, his face inches from mine, and this time I didn't pull away. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then sure, and for a moment, the world fell away. The kiss was a spark, igniting something I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. Caleb's hand cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin, and I leaned into it, chasing the warmth. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes were wide, like he was just as surprised as I was. "I didn't plan that," he said, a nervous laugh escaping him. I wanted to say something clever, but all I managed was, "Me neither." We sat there in silence, the city's pulse filling the space between us. My mind was a mess. Part of me wanted to dive back in, to lose myself in whatever this was, but another part screamed that this was a mistake. I was leaving tomorrow. I had a life to figure out, a job to salvage, an ex who wouldn't stop texting. Caleb seemed to sense my turmoil. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said, squeezing my hand. "Just be here." I tried. We talked until the stars came out, about everything and nothing. His first crush, a guy from his high school football team who never knew. My fear of failing as an artist. The way we both felt like outsiders, even in places meant to be home. But when I went to bed that night on Noah's lumpy couch, I couldn't sleep. Caleb's kiss lingered, a question I didn't know how to answer. The next morning, Noah was back to his cheerful self, oblivious to the shift between me and Caleb. "You're heading out today, right?" he asked, flipping pancakes with more success than Caleb had. I nodded, my chest heavy. Caleb was quiet, sipping coffee at the table, his eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to say something, to ask what this weekend meant, but the words wouldn't come. Then my phone rang. It was my boss, apologizing for our fight and offering me a chance to pitch a new project. It was the lifeline I'd been waiting for, but it meant going back to Seattle, back to the grind. I glanced at Caleb, who was now washing dishes, his movements deliberate, like he was trying to stay busy. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, and neither path was clear. Before I left, Caleb pulled me aside. "Eli," he said, his voice low, "I don't know what this is, but it's real. If you feel it too, don't just walk away." His words hit like a punch. I wanted to stay, to see where this could go, but fear clawed at me. Fear of getting hurt again, of appending my life for something that might not last. I hugged him, hard, and promised to call. But as I drove away, Portland shrinking in my rearview mirror, I wasn't sure I would. Back in Seattle, the days blurred into a haze of work and avoidance. Jamie's texts kept coming, each one a reminder of why I'd sworn off relationships. But Caleb's face kept creeping into my thoughts. His laugh, his vulnerability, the way he'd looked at me like I was worth seeing. I started sketching in the journal he'd given me, filling the pages with fragments of that weekend. The rooftop, the city lights, his hand in mine. A week later, Caleb texted me a photo of the Portland skyline at dusk, with a simple message, "Missed this." My heart ached. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I sent, "Me too." It was small, but it was something. That night, I dreamed of rain and rooftops and a kiss that felt like a beginning. Seattle felt colder than I remembered, or maybe it was just me. The journal Caleb gave me sat on my desk, its pages filling up with sketches I couldn't show anyone yet. Not my boss, not my friends, not even Noah. They were too raw, too full of a weekend I was still trying to understand. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was Caleb, but I was too scared to reach out first. What if he'd moved on? What if that kiss was just a drunken impulse? 2 weeks after I left Portland, Noah called. "Caleb's been moping around like a kicked puppy," he said, half laughing. "What did you do to him, Eli?" I froze, my heart racing. Nothing? I lied. But Noah wasn't buying it. He's not himself. Fix it, little brother. I hung up, staring at the journal, at a sketch of Caleb's profile against the city skyline. I needed to see him. I drove back to Portland the next weekend, my stomach in knots. When I knocked on Noah's door, Caleb answered, his eyes widening in surprise. Eli? He said, like he couldn't believe I was there. Before I could lose my nerve, I blurted, I couldn't stop thinking about you. His face softened, and he pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. We spent the day together, wandering the city, talking about everything we hadn't said on the rooftop. Caleb told me about his struggles with drinking, how he was trying to cut back, to be someone he could be proud of. I told him about my fear of failing, how Jamie's betrayal had made me doubt myself. You're enough, Eli, he said, his voice fierce. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. I believed him for the first time in a long time. That night, we ended up back on the rooftop, the same blanket around us, the city alive below. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely audible. This feels too big. Caleb nodded, his hand finding mine. Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. We kissed again, and this time it wasn't just a spark. It was a promise. But promises are fragile. The next morning, I got a call from Jamie, begging to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed, thinking I needed closure. We met at a coffee shop, and Jamie was all apologies, saying he'd made a mistake, that he wanted me back. I looked at him, at the face I'd once loved, and felt nothing. I'm done, I told him, and walked away, lighter than I'd been in months. When I told Caleb, he didn't gloat or judge. He just listened, then pulled me close. You're braver than you think, he said. I wasn't so sure, but I wanted to be. For him, for myself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Caleb and I texted constantly, stealing weekends to see each other, building something neither of us had expected. He started going to meetings, working on his drinking, and I started sharing my sketches, even submitting a few to a local gallery. Noah, of course, took credit for introducing us, never missing a chance to tease. But it wasn't all easy. Distance was hard. Portland and Seattle were only 3 hours apart, but life kept pulling us in different directions. My job demanded more of my time, and Caleb's bar shifts were unpredictable. There were nights we argued, frustrated by missed calls and canceled plans. I don't want to lose this, I told him once, my voice breaking. He drove up that night, showing up at my door at 2 a.m., exhausted but determined. We'll make it work, he said, and we did. One evening, 6 months after that first weekend, Caleb invited me to an open mic night at his bar. He'd been sober for 3 months, and his smile was brighter than I'd ever seen. I sat in the crowd, sketching him as he worked, his confidence magnetic. After the last performer, he took the mic, nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. "This is for someone who changed everything," he said, looking right at me. He read a poem, raw, honest, about finding light in unexpected places. The room clapped, but I barely heard them. I was crying, and so was he. Later, on the rooftop, he handed me a key. "Move in," he said simply. "Noah's cool with it, and I want you here." My heart stopped. It was a risk, a leap, but I'd spent too long playing it safe. "Okay," I whispered, and we sealed it with a kiss under the stars. Life didn't magically fix itself. I still had bad days at work, and Caleb still fought his demons. But we faced them together, building a life that was messy but ours. The journal he'd given me was nearly full now, pages bursting with sketches of us. Of rooftops, city lights, and the moments that made us. I didn't need permission to live anymore. I had him, and that was enough.